Hello, my beautiful people, and welcome to part 2 of Movie Marathon Madness, the Marvel movies. Now, in case you missed part 1, don't worry, you didn't miss much. We only talked about bad movies in that video. Although you are probably wondering, film buffs, why did it take 5 months in between parts? Well, the short answer, busy with other stuff. Long answer, throughout June and July I got busy with theater. In August and September I was busy with Steam Temper, and October was Halloween. So yeah, it's been quite a few months. So, but don't worry, I'm back for Movie Marathon Madness, the Marvel movies, part 2. And don't worry, we're actually going to be talking about some good movies now. This whole video is full of good movies. Good movies for everybody! Yay! It's funny looking back on Blade all these years later, knowing just how impactful this film was on the history of superhero and comic book movies. In fact, the film was released a year after what many people declare to be the worst year in comic book history, where Batman and Robin, Steel, and Spawn were all released the same year. Men in Black was the exception. And even though the film wasn't the best with critics, audiences loved it, and it was a massive hit, gaining 2 sequels. And this movie basically started the massive superhero renaissance and comic book movie renaissance that we've been seeing over the last decade and a half. And it's this simple little movie about a guy who's half vampire hunting down other different vampires that we have to think, because it is very different than the type of comic book movies that we get today. For starters, it's a lot more serious. Now, it is definitely more fun than some other movies that were being released around the time or a little bit afterwards, but it is definitely more serious than, say, the Christopher Reeve Superman movies or the aforementioned Batman and Robin. But this movie does remember to have fun, since this is a guy who goes around and hunts down vampires, and that concept is sort of meant to be fun. And the titular vampire hunter, Blade, is a fun character. Wesley Snipes does a decent performance. He does his absolute best with the character, and his acting is alright. The story, on the other hand, it's not the best, but here's the thing. Most people don't really give a crap about the story of the first Blade movie. People mainly just remember the awesome action scenes and Wesley Snipes' performance, and the action in this film is freaking amazing, especially the opening nightclub scene, which is probably one of my favorite scenes in comic book movie history. You got this dude who thinks he's gonna be getting laid, but he's actually food for the vampires. And then Blade comes in, and he actually goes ahead and kills all the vampires in the room. And it's a beautiful, awesome looking scene. And all the fight scenes are like that in this movie. These fight scenes are just absolute spectacular. I'm very interested to see what the MCU's take on Blade is going to be, not just because the original trilogy existed, but also because, well, the film went through a bunch of delays and production troubles, and those usually either make either really interesting movies or really disastrous movies, where the only thing that's really interesting is the behind the scenes aspects. But we're just gonna have to wait and see in 2024 to see how this film turns out. Overall, I'd say that the first Blade movie is a pretty well made comic book action film. The action is spectacular, the story alright, and Wesley Snipes, well, not perfect or really that spectacular in the role, is still a classic comic book performance that many people will remember for decades on end, and Blade is just a fun time. Definitely check it out if you haven't seen it already. Alright, let's get this out of the way. This movie was directed by a pedophile. It has nothing to do with the film itself, but I feel like if I don't bring it up at least once throughout this entire series, somebody will be like, you didn't bring up the whole Bryan Singer thing. Well, I did now, so let's just move on to the actual review of the movie. Another film that was released in the late 90s and early 2000s that really helped shape the world of modern superhero films was the original X-Men. And looking back on this film 22 years later, it still holds up today as a fun superhero movie, but also a great film about prejudice and how basically all of the human characters in this film are just horrified of mutants and the possibilities of what they can do, which makes sense since the X-Men were created as a response to the civil rights movement, and to this day, the X-Men are meant to represent all forms of minorities in our modern culture, whether that be race, sexuality, religion, whatever. Another thing that's great about this film is the casting. Obviously, there's Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, Patrick Stewart as Professor Xavier, and Ian McKellen as Magneto. But I also really enjoy Halle Berry as Storm. I think that's a pretty underrated comic book performance. And the rest of the actors, with the exception of Rogue's actress, I didn't really care for her. They all really do a great job bringing the characters to life. And the effects for 2000 are also pretty good, and overall I'd say that the first X-Men movie still holds up to this day. It obviously meant a lot more back in 2000, but even looking back on it today, it still holds up as a fun, entertaining superhero film, and I definitely would say that its message is super important today, given on how a lot of Marvel fans seem to react to people like the mutants. I'm looking at you, Nerdronic, freaking piece of crap. I really don't like Nerdrotic, guys. Nerdrotic sucks. So do Geeks and Gamers, and The Quartering, and Clownfish TV, and Ryan Kino, all those guys. They can go die in a hole for all I care. They're better off if they just were never on the internet, or if they were just never born to begin with. The world would be so better off without these guys. Screw them. And they also, all of them have small penises too. Like seriously, what the frick was up with the Batman review, Ryan? You're not even trying to hide your racism anymore. It's quite a coincidence how I just made a little rant on racist YouTubers, and now I'm talking about a movie starring a black man. That was not intentional. I just thought it was kind of funny. So I actually don't have a lot to say about Blade 2. It's basically more the same as the first movie. Action's cool. Wesley Snipes is pretty good. Gory. Really nice and gory. Do you like the first movie? You'll like this one too. The only thing I think is really notable about this film is that Guillermo del Toro directed this, which I think is neat. Okay, seriously, how many more problematic people are attached to these movies? Yes, folks, we have the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man from 2002, and yes, this film is insanely cheesy, but Spider-Man, especially the really early Spider-Man comics, were kind of supposed to be cheesy. So with this film being more of a direct adaptation of those earlier comics, it perfectly fits the tone of early Spider-Man comics, and you gotta respect the movie for that, for being faithful to its source material. The action in this film is actually very well done. Sam Raimi is a well-known filmmaker for doing a lot of stuff in camera, and it definitely shows within this film. A lot of stuff is done on camera. Not a whole lot of CG is used between the fights and the stunts. In fact, in the case of Willem Dafoe, some of the actors even do a lot of their own stunts, which is very awesome. And speaking of Willem Dafoe, let's talk about the actors. Tobey Maguire is a pretty good Spider-Man. I'm under the impression that all of the movie live action Spider-Man are good and faithful to the comics. They're just faithful to different eras and different types of Spider-Man. And Tobey Maguire is clearly faithful to the really early Spider-Man comics where he's still in high school and he's still a big old dweeb obsessed with Mary Jane, and he plays that role very effectively. Mary Jane's also great. James Franco is pretty good, I'm not gonna lie. And of course, Willem Dafoe is fantastic as the Green Goblin, and by far one of the top 5 greatest casting decisions in the history of film. J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson. He just gets this character. He nails absolutely everything about this performance in whatever film or TV show he plays this character in. I honestly can't see another actor playing this character after watching this first movie and all the other movies and shows that I've seen him play this character. He's just that perfect as this role. Mwah. Chef's kiss. So yeah, Spider-Man. Definitely check it out if you haven't already. Let's face it, you have. It's a classic for a reason. Alright, so that concludes part 2. We have seen 8 movies thus far, and we have 100 billion more. I promise that part 3 won't take another 5 months, but it will definitely be coming out next year because I have a bunch of Christmas videos I want to make. So come January, you will get part 3 of Movie Marathon Madness, the Marvel movie. So if you want to see that videos, then please hit the subscribe button and turn on all notifications. And also be sure to like, comment, and subscribe and ring the bell to be notified that when all future videos are uploaded. And if we get to 300 subscribers by the end of the year, then I will make one giant video reviewing every SpongeBob video game. But if you want to see that happen, then please hit the subscribe button down below. We are so close to 300, I can taste it. So please make that happen. I will only make the video if we reach that stretch goal by the end of the year. So please make it happen. But until then, I will see you later. Bye!